The Senate chamber was heavy with tension. A faint buzz of whispered conversations faded into a cold silence, thick enough to press against your chest. The lights overhead hummed with a soft, clinical indifference, illuminating the polished mahogany desks below, where some of the most powerful people in America sat frozen, watching the drama unfold. It was supposed to be a routine oversight hearing, nothing more than political theater with pre-rehearsed barbs and polished sound bites. But what happened next would become a thunderclap in the halls of power, a moment etched into political lore. Gavin Newsom, governor of California, stood at the center of the Senate floor, his jaw clenched, fists at his side, his tall frame slightly trembling not from fear, but from fury. Across from him, Louisiana Senator John Kennedy leaned back in his leather chair, unfazed, almost amused, his drawl slow and deliberate as he toyed with a pen between his fingers. Newsom had come to Washington to defend California's controversial New Climate Initiative, a sweeping set of reforms that would impact not just his state, but ripple across the national economy. But Kennedy, known for his colorful turns of phrase and folksy Southern charm, had come to do what he did best: embarrass and eviscerate. The exchange began with sarcasm. Kennedy, eyes twinkling with mock concern, had leaned into the mic and said, "Governor, I don't mean to be ugly, but your policies make as much sense as a screen door on a submarine. Are you trying to save the planet, or just bankrupt your state faster than a possum on a highway at rush hour?" There were chuckles. The room tilted against Newsom, but he didn't flinch. He looked at Kennedy with a calm born of years under fire through wildfires, pandemics, political betrayals. Then he stepped forward. "No, Senator," Newsom said, voice steady, "I'm trying to save my grandchildren from drowning in your denial." The chamber fell silent. Kennedy's smirk faltered, but that was only the spark. The fire came seconds later. Newsom's voice rose, not yelling, but loud, clear, razor sharp. "You sit here with your jokes and drawls while my state burns every summer. You sip sweet tea and call it freedom while children wear masks to breathe. You laugh, but I've buried firefighters. I've held mothers who lost homes. I've walked through ash where cities used to be. And you call that policy nonsense. You call that asterisk a joke." The room held its breath. Newsom kept going. "You think I'm afraid of your sound bites, your Fox News moments. I'm not. I've been shouted down by protesters with bullhorns outside my kids' school. I've stared into the eyes of oil lobbyists trying to buy my silence. I've watched the ocean eat away at homes that stood for 100 years. So no, Senator, I will not let you reduce this to a punchline." Kennedy, eyes narrowed now, opened his mouth, but Newsom cut him off with the force of a father protecting his family. "Don't talk to me about economics," Newsom thundered. "Don't talk to me about freedom, because if your idea of liberty is letting the world die so a few men can grow rich, then you can keep it. I'm here for something bigger." Kennedy tried to reply, but the words caught. He looked away, and in that moment, the room saw it not humiliation, not defeat, but something far rarer in Washington, the absence of moral high ground. But the story doesn't end there. That moment was only the beginning of a storm that swept through the nation. Behind the cameras and headlines were two men, each carved by different worlds. Gavin Newsom had grown up in the Bay Area, dyslexic, often misunderstood. His father, a state appeals court judge, had raised him to believe that public service was sacred, not a stepping stone. Gavin learned early how to fight with poise, how to lose with grace. His dream was always bigger than politics. It was legacy. He wanted to leave behind a better world for his children, even if it cost him everything. John Kennedy, on the other hand, was a product of the Deep South. Brilliant, Oxford-educated, and underestimated by those who mistook his down-home charm for ignorance. He believed in the Constitution like Scripture and saw government as a necessary evil. But beneath the wit and winks, he carried a deep fear that America was losing its soul to coastal elitism, that tradition was becoming taboo. Their confrontation lit up the media. Memes, debates, essays, everyone had an opinion, but behind the scenes, something unexpected was unfolding. Newsom returned to California, exhausted but invigorated. At home, his teenage daughter asked him over dinner, "Did you really scream at that senator?" He laughed. "No," he said, "I told the truth, loud enough to be heard." Meanwhile, Kennedy sat alone in his office, watching the footage. He replayed it twice, then leaned back, thoughtful. Something in Newsom's words had struck a nerve he didn't expect. Over the next few weeks, strange things began to happen. Kennedy requested a closed-door meeting with wildfire survivors from California. He brought in climate scientists not to argue but to listen, and slowly something shifted, not his politics but his posture. He still opposed Newsom's bill, but now, with respect, the two men, unlikely as it seemed, began to correspond privately. At first, it was tense. Letters about policy, debates over feasibility, but somewhere along the way, the tone softened. Kennedy wrote, "You fight like a man who's lost something." Newsom replied, "And you deflect like a man who's afraid to lose." Weeks turned into months. One day, Newsom invited Kennedy to visit Paradise, California, the town that was nearly erased by wildfire. Kennedy accepted. They walked through the blackened husks of homes, the silence so complete it hurt. They stood under a scorched tree that had somehow survived. And when a little girl offered Kennedy a flower, wild yellow growing in the ash, he knelt, took it and said, "Thank you, darlin'. This means more than you know." That night, they shared bourbon on the porch of a rebuilt home. No cameras, no aides, just two men watching the stars. "I still don't agree with your bill," Kennedy said. "I don't need you to," Newsom replied. "I need you to care." "I do," Kennedy said quietly. "I just never knew how much until now." Their rivalry didn't end, but it changed. What started as a firestorm of fury became a cautious alliance. Together, they drafted a bipartisan amendment that focused on wildfire prevention and community resilience. Small, but real. It passed. The news barely made headlines. No screaming, no viral soundbite, but it mattered. In the end, the story wasn't about who shouted loudest. It was about who listened, who evolved. And as Newsom said later in a commencement speech, sometimes the people we clash with most are the ones who challenge us to become our best. Don't fear confrontation, fear silence, because only in the fire of disagreement can we forge the steel of progress. That moment, when Gavin Newsom screamed not in rage, but in truth, didn't just humble John Kennedy. It opened a door, and in Washington, that's rarer than gold, a lesson, perhaps, for all of us, that behind every fierce opponent is a human being. And sometimes, the fiercest fights lead to the most unexpected alliances and the deepest healing.